All right, get ready to explore a place and time that truly set the stage for our world today, the legendary Library of Alexandria. We're diving deep into its story in this deep dive, unearthing how it rose, what it reveals about knowledge and power, and why it ultimately faded.
It's a journey filled with twists and turns, and honestly, some surprising revelations about a place often shrouded in myth and speculation.
Exactly. We tend to think we know the Library of Alexandria, but do we really? To get a clearer picture, we're drawing from some fascinating sources. We've got Carl Sagan's Cosmos, always a classic, Adrienne Mayer's work on Hypatia, which sheds light on one of the library's most brilliant minds, and a book that really caught my eye, The Greeks, A Global History.
Each offers a unique perspective, and together they paint a vivid tapestry of this ancient wonder.
So are you ready to journey back to ancient Alexandria?
Absolutely, let's step back in time and see this legendary hub of knowledge through fresh eyes.
Okay, picture this. It's around the 3rd century BCE. You find yourself in Alexandria, a city bustling with life and ideas. Greeks, Egyptians, Romans, all drawn to this vibrant hub. It was a truly cosmopolitan city, centuries ahead of its time.
And at its heart stood the Library of Alexandria. More than just a collection of scrolls, it was a symbol of the Ptolemaic ruler's ambition to make Alexandria the intellectual capital of the world.
The Ptolemies, now those were some interesting figures, descendants of Alexander the Great, right?
That's right, and they were obsessed with amassing knowledge, bringing together the greatest minds and the rarest texts.
They didn't just want a library, they wanted the ultimate library.
Precisely, and they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty in the process.
Oh, now you got to give me an example. What do you mean by get their hands dirty?
Well, let's just say their methods for acquiring knowledge weren't always, how shall we put it, by the book.
You're telling me there's intrigue even before we open a single scroll. I'm hooked.
Imagine this: Athens, the heart of Greek tragedy, possessing priceless manuscripts from the likes of Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides.
Treasures beyond measure. Any scholar would give, well, almost anything to have those.
And Ptolemy III, he knew their value. He craved them for the library.
So what did he do? Did he offer a king's ransom, send scholars on a mission?
He struck a deal, a rather audacious one. He offered Athens a hefty deposit to, and this is key, borrow the manuscripts.
Borrow. With a deposit like that, Athens might have suspected something was up.
They weren't fools, but the deposit was substantial, and the agreement was to borrow, not to keep.
Oh, I see where this is going. A classic bait and switch.
Precisely. Ptolemy III got his hands on the manuscripts, and then, well, he kept them.
Wow, that's bold. What happened to the deposit?
Forfeited. Considered a small price to pay for such treasures.
That's more than dedication to a library. That's making a statement.
Indeed, the Ptolemies were sending a message. The Library of Alexandria would be second to none.
They were playing the long game, weren't they? Building for the ages.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about hoarding scrolls. The library had a grander vision. They aimed for accessibility, at least for the select few.
Okay, so we're talking about a time when knowledge was power, often closely guarded.
Right, but the library scholars, they embarked on a massive undertaking, translating texts from across the known world into Greek.
That's incredible, creating a common language for scholars from diverse backgrounds.
It was a groundbreaking endeavor, but we have to acknowledge access wasn't exactly democratic.
So not everyone could just walk in and browse the shelves.
It was primarily a space for elite scholars, those connected to the ruling class.
A reminder that even in ancient times, access to knowledge wasn't always equal. But to be fair, even having a space dedicated to knowledge like that was something special, right?
Oh, absolutely. The library's influence was undeniable, but it's a nuanced legacy.
And that's what makes it so fascinating to unpack, right?
Exactly, and it gets even more intriguing as we move beyond the scrolls of philosophy and literature.
Oh, now you've really piqued my curiosity. What else is there? Tell me more.
Let's talk about some of those scrolls that went beyond philosophy and literature.
All right, I'm ready for a change of pace. What did they have?
We often picture the library filled with philosophers and poets. But what about engineers and inventors?
Okay, now that's not the first thing that comes to mind when I think of the Library of Alexandria, but I'm intrigued.
Prepare to be surprised. One figure stands out: Hero of Alexandria.
Hero of Alexandria, what do we know about him?
A true polymath, an engineer, a mathematician, an inventor, centuries ahead of his time.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about Hero.
He actually conducted much of his work within the library's walls. And get this, he designed some incredible machines, like early concepts for vending machines.
Vending machines. In ancient Alexandria.
Yes, and even more mind-blowing, automatic temple doors.
Automatic temple doors. That's amazing. What else?
This is where it gets really interesting. He designed a basic steam engine.
Hold on. Are we talking about the same Sting engine I'm thinking of? The one that powered the Industrial Revolution?
That's the one. But this was centuries earlier in ancient Alexandria.
That changes everything. So why didn't they have an industrial revolution back then? They had the technology.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And like they were on the verge of something huge, but it never happened.
And this is where the social and economic realities of the time come into play.
Okay, so what were the social and economic realities holding them back?
Let's revisit Hero's steam engine for a moment. It makes you wonder. In a society so reliant on slave labor, with their pressing need for labor-saving technologies.
That's a really good point. If you've got a readily available and inexpensive workforce, why bother with complex machines?
Precisely. Technological progress often emerges from necessity, a need to solve a problem or boost efficiency. In ancient Alexandria, those driving forces weren't there, or at least weren't seen the same way they might be today.
It's like this paradox of progress. They possessed the knowledge, the potential, but the social and economic realities of their time just didn't incentivize them to take those inventions further.
It makes you think about what could have been, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And this leads us to another captivating aspect of our deep dive, the story of Hypatia, a woman who truly embodied the spirit of the Library of Alexandria.
Hypatia.
This is where we delve into one of the most celebrated and tragically figures of this era. And just a reminder, we're pulling from Adrian Mayer's work on Hypatia, which really gets into the depth of her life and influence.
Hypatia was an exceptional individual, a philosopher, a mathematician, and astronomer. She thrived in a male-dominated intellectual world with incredible prowess and impact.
It's hard to imagine we're talking about the 4th and 5th centuries CE, a time when women were often confined to the domestic sphere.
And yet she rose to become a leading intellectual figure in Alexandria, drawing devoted students from far and wide.
Her story is a potent reminder that the pursuit of knowledge and social progress are deeply intertwined. Hypatia's very existence challenged the norms of her time, and her scholarship, especially in astronomy and mathematics, demonstrated that the quest for knowledge could transcend traditional boundaries.
She's like a beacon of brilliance cutting through the ages. But her story also highlights that knowledge doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's constantly being shaped by the currents of social and political change.
And in Hypatia's time, those currents were growing increasingly turbulent, right? With the Roman Empire crumbling and Alexandria itself caught in the throes of religious and political turmoil.
Sadly, yes. The library, once a symbol of intellectual openness and collaboration, began facing threats from various fronts, including political instability, dwindling resources, and a growing intolerance for intellectual pursuits that challenged the prevailing religious doctrines.
It's almost heartbreaking to picture this gradual decline, the slow erosion of what was once a vibrant hub of learning.
Tragically, Hypatia's own fate became deeply intertwined with the library's decline. As Alexandria fractured along religious lines, Hypatia, a symbol of pagan intellectualism, became a target of suspicion and hostility.
And ultimately a victim of violence. Her murder by a fanatical mob is a stark reminder of how fragile knowledge can be, and the human cost of intolerance.
It's a chilling symbol of the end of an era, the fall of an icon, both literally and figuratively. While the exact details surrounding the library's destruction are still debated, there's no doubt that it was a gradual process of decline, marked by acts of violence and neglect.
It's often said that the library's destruction represented a devastating loss of knowledge, with countless scrolls and texts lost forever.
While the loss of any knowledge is undoubtedly tragic, it's crucial to remember that the library's demise wasn't just about the physical destruction of objects. It represented a fundamental shift in cultural values, a turning away from the principles of inquiry and open discourse that had defined Alexandria's golden age of intellectualism.
It's a stark reminder that progress isn't inevitable, is it?
Not at all. And the library's story. It challenges us to think critically about knowledge, power, and how those forces interact.
It's easy to romanticize the past, but when we look at the Library of Alexandria, we see this tension between, well, ambition and idealism.
Absolutely. You've got the Ptolemies, driven to amass knowledge, but also to consolidate their own power.
Right. They created this incredible institution, but it was ultimately tied to their own interests.
And then you have Hypatia, representing this pure love of learning, this thirst for understanding that transcends social and political boundaries.
But she existed in a world where those boundaries were becoming increasingly rigid and dangerous.
Exactly. Her story reminds us that knowledge can be a threat to those who seek to control and maintain power.
It makes you wonder about the what ifs, doesn't it? What if the library hadn't been destroyed? What if Hypatia's work had been allowed to flourish?
It's a question that continues to fascinate scholars and historians. What if the spirit of inquiry that defined Alexandria had endured? What if that knowledge had been shared more widely, put into practice?
It's almost like picturing an alternate timeline, one where the seeds of scientific and technological advancement took root centuries earlier.
Imagine the possibilities. The steam engine, not just a novelty, but a catalyst for real change.
It's captivating thought, but even with its tragic end, the Library of Alexandria's legacy, it goes beyond what might have been.
It serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of knowledge, of open inquiry, of challenging dogma, and fighting for intellectual freedom.
Those are values that are just as relevant today as they were back then, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The story of the Library of Alexandria, it's not just ancient history. It's a reflection of our own relationship with knowledge and its power.
And a call to action, I think, to protect and nurture that spirit of inquiry, to ensure that knowledge is accessible, that different perspectives are valued, that we never stop questioning and exploring.
It's about recognizing that the pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing journey, one that requires constant vigilance and a commitment to truth and understanding.
Well said, and on that note, we'll leave our listeners to ponder the echoes of the past and the possibilities of the future. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Library of Alexandria, a place that continues to spark our imaginations and challenge our assumptions about knowledge and its impact on the world.